of building a better life, doing a reset for a better life.
When you think of someone whose life has been dedicated to serving others, it's hard not to immediately think of Rick Warren. For decades, he has been a guiding light for countless people around the world through his ministry, teachings, and outreach. His books, especially The Purpose-Driven Life, have inspired millions to reflect on the meaning of their existence. And his leadership at Saddleback Church has made it one of the largest, most influential churches in the world. But in the midst of all this success, Rick Warren's life has not been without its share of pain and heartache. Today, we have some heartbreaking news about the man who has touched so many lives, and it's a story that is both tragic and deeply human. You may know him as a pastor, a best-selling author, or a global leader in the Christian faith, but there's more to Rick Warren than the public persona we all recognize. In this video, we're diving into the recent heart-wrenching developments in Rick Warren's life. Stay with us as we explore what's been happening and how this news will likely change the course of his ministry and his personal journey. Before we move ahead, I want to ask you, what do you think is the hardest challenge any leader, particularly someone in Rick Warren's position, can face? Drop your thoughts in the comments below as we take a closer look at what makes this news so difficult to process, especially when you realize the kind of person Rick Warren is and the depth of his character. The rise of Rick Warren. Rick Warren's rise to prominence in the Christian community can be attributed not only to his commitment to biblical teaching, but also to his innovative approach to church leadership and personal sacrifice. After founding Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California, Rick Warren's focus was clear. He wanted to create a church where people could experience meaningful connections and discover their purpose in life through faith. This approach was centered on his core belief that life was not about self-promotion, but about living with intentionality and purpose. Warren's breakthrough book, The Purpose-Driven Church, introduced concepts that would redefine church growth in the modern era. He encouraged churches to focus less on mere numerical growth and more on creating a church that genuinely met people's spiritual needs and helped them understand their God-given purpose. The book outlined a strategic approach to church life, emphasizing 5 biblical purposes: worship, ministry, evangelism, fellowship, and discipleship. These principles allowed churches to build more robust and healthier communities, rather than just focusing on Sunday services. Warren's impact was monumental, as thousands of churches adopted his model, transforming the way they conducted outreach and spiritual formation. However, it was The Purpose-Driven Life, published in 2002, that cemented Warren's legacy as one of the most influential Christian voices of the 21st century. The book's message resonated with people across denominations, cultures, and age groups. At its heart, The Purpose-Driven Life was about discovering why we are on earth and how our lives can be aligned with God's greater plan. Warren's writing connected with a wide audience because it emphasized personal responsibility and fulfillment, something that was easily relatable to people from all walks of life. By 2005, The Purpose-Driven Life had sold over 30 million copies worldwide and was translated into more than 50 languages, making it one of the best-selling non-fiction books of all time. In addition to his academic and literary accomplishments, Warren's leadership at Saddleback Church was a testament to his vision. His leadership model was focused on building a community of believers that was both expansive and deeply relational. Saddleback wasn't just about teaching on Sunday mornings. It was about equipping people to go out and serve their local and global communities. Warren promoted a church culture that encouraged people to volunteer in missions, adopt children, and use their talents to help others. His outreach efforts weren't just theoretical or abstract. They were actionable and grounded in service. A critical aspect of Warren's ministry was his commitment to global causes, particularly poverty alleviation, healthcare, and education. He spearheaded initiatives like the Peace Plan in 2005, which sought to address global issues of global poverty, disease, illiteracy, and corruption. Through partnerships with international organizations, Warren mobilized thousands of volunteers who help provide practical support in disaster-stricken areas, educate the poor, and promote health and wellness worldwide. This initiative demonstrated his belief that the church's mission extended beyond the walls of the local congregation and was an invitation to Christians everywhere to get involved in addressing global injustices. Warren's commitment to financial transparency and generosity set him apart from many other megachurch leaders. In 2003, he made the bold decision to stop taking a salary from Saddleback Church, which was $110,000 annually at the time. Instead of accepting his salary, Warren returned the money and pledged to donate 90% of the royalties from the purpose-driven life to charitable causes. This act of financial humility was meant to demonstrate that true leadership in the kingdom of God is not about personal wealth, but about dedicating resources to furthering God's work on earth. Warren's financial model resonated with many and inspired other pastors and leaders to adopt similar practices. Rick Warren's approach to interfaith relationships and his stance on the LGBTQ community have drawn significant criticism from certain segments of the Christian community, particularly those who feel that his inclusive actions compromise biblical teachings. Warren's willingness to work with people of various faiths, including Muslims, Mormons, and Buddhists, has been seen by some as compromising the exclusivity of the gospel message. His comments, such as working alongside atheists or Muslims on humanitarian projects, and his participation in events like breaking a Ramadan fast at a mosque, have fueled the belief that he is overly respectful of those outside the Christian faith. Critics argue that such actions blur the lines between Christianity and other religions, potentially diluting the gospel's call for salvation through Jesus Christ alone. While Warren has consistently affirmed salvation through Jesus, his active participation in interfaith dialogue has led some to question whether he is watering down his faith to be more palatable to others. Critics argue that Christians are supposed to be firm in their beliefs, standing apart from other religions and promoting the idea that non-Christians are wrong in their faith. Warren's approach, which focuses on collaboration and humanitarian efforts, contrasts sharply with the view that Christians should engage in theological confrontation to prove their faith's superiority. Additionally, Warren's stance on LGBTQ issues has raised eyebrows. His public support for the LGBTQ community, especially through his involvement in AIDS initiatives and his friendships with gay individuals, has caused dismay among conservative Christian circles. His statement about working with gay organizations to fight AIDS and his open acceptance of LGBTQ individuals at Saddleback Church have been seen as a betrayal of traditional Christian values, which typically oppose same-sex relationships. While Warren maintains that his theology remains orthodox, critics argue that his actions reflect a reluctance to take a firm stand on biblical teachings regarding sexuality, implying a compromise on doctrinal purity. Ultimately, critics accuse Rick Warren of adopting a more accommodating and less confrontational approach that does not align with the traditional understanding of Christian exclusivism, particularly when it comes to other religions and LGBTQ acceptance. A father's grief. The grief Rick and Kay Warren experienced when they lost their 27-year-old son, Matthew, to suicide is a kind of pain that most parents fear, but hope never to face. In his heartfelt letter to his congregation, Rick opened his heart, sharing the depths of their sorrow and asking for prayers as they navigated the unbearable loss. In doing so, Rick not only revealed his own devastation, but also gave voice to the unseen struggles of so many families affected by mental illness. Matthew, as Rick described, was a man with a heart full of kindness, gentleness, and compassion. Yet for all of his warmth and generosity, Matthew's life was haunted by a mental illness that began early and never let up. No matter how much therapy, medication, or prayer he received, the darkness of depression and the relentless despair that accompanied it remained a constant companion. It is a tragic irony that a father who had dedicated his life to helping others find healing and purpose, who had written a best-selling book that touched millions of lives, was unable to shield his own son from the invisible force that was mental illness. The struggle Matthew faced wasn't simply a series of bad days or moments of sadness. It was a deep, chronic battle that seemed insurmountable. As Rick shared, there were times when Matthew openly expressed his hopelessness, even though he also held on to his faith. "Dad, I know I'm going to heaven. Why can't I just die and end this pain?" Those words strike at the very heart of the tragedy. They reflect the desperation and anguish that so many people with mental illness feel, but can't always express in ways that others can understand. For a son to express such deep pain to his father, knowing that he had faith in the afterlife, speaks to the cruel grip of mental illness that no amount of love or spiritual assurance seem to alleviate. What makes the grief even more difficult for Rick and Kay is the knowledge that, despite their best efforts, despite the love, prayers, and therapies, they could not stop their son from taking his life. There is an inherent helplessness in that. For parents who would have done anything to relieve their child's suffering, the inability to fix the situation is an insurmountable sorrow. And yet, despite that pain, Rick spoke with deep admiration for Matthew's strength and perseverance. Even in his darkest moments, Matthew kept going, enduring year after year, despite the overwhelming desire to escape the pain. This tragic loss also forced Rick to reflect on the realities of suffering in ways he had not previously known. As someone who had spent decades helping others find purpose and healing through the teachings of his ministry, Rick had always worked to provide people with hope, encouragement, and a sense of meaning. But in the face of such devastating loss, even he could not find easy answers. His perspective on grief and suffering became more nuanced, less about offering quick fixes and more about acknowledging the complexity of pain, especially mental and emotional pain that is often invisible to the outside world. Matthew's battle with mental illness underscored a reality that many people, including those in Rick's large congregation, may not fully understand. Mental illness does not always present itself in obvious ways. Its sufferers often hide their pain behind a smile, a kind word, or an outward appearance of normalcy. It's a silent and unseen struggle that can be masked by the courage of those who are fighting it. In Rick's letter, there's a quiet plea for understanding. He speaks not only as a grieving father, but also as someone who has now, in a very personal way, come to understand the deep and often invisible wounds that mental illness leaves on individuals and families. The public nature of Rick's grief, as someone so well known, added an additional layer of complexity to his pain. He had spent his life leading a church of thousands and preaching about purpose, healing, and hope. Yet here he was, powerless in the face of his own son's suffering. This vulnerability, sharing a personal tragedy with the world, also became a form of ministry. It was an invitation for others to not only grieve with him, but to start a larger conversation about mental health in the faith community. By opening up about his own pain, Rick gave people permission to share their own struggles, whether with grief, depression, or mental illness. He showed that even the strongest among us have moments of weakness and despair, and that it's okay to ask for help. In a culture where mental health is often stigmatized or misunderstood, the Warrens' openness about Matthew's struggle helped shine a light on the fact that mental illness is a real, difficult, and often overwhelming condition. The loss of Matthew brought to the forefront the importance of mental health care and the need for better support systems for those who suffer in silence. This shift in perspective, which Rick publicly acknowledged, has been crucial in transforming the way many people in his church and beyond think about mental health. It's no longer enough to simply offer prayers for healing. It's vital to offer tangible support, be it through counseling, therapy, or just a listening ear. Moreover, Rick's response to his son's death revealed the depth of his faith. While he grieved profoundly, he also acknowledged that Matthew was now at peace, free from the torment that had plagued him for so long. There was no denying the sorrow of the loss, but there was also a comforting sense of hope. Matthew was no longer suffering, For Rick, this understanding of the afterlife didn't erase the pain but added a layer of comfort to the harsh reality, the heartbreaking news. As if losing his son Matthew wasn't enough, Rick Warren faced another significant challenge that shook both his personal life and his ministry. After 4 decades of service as the lead pastor of Saddleback Church, Warren announced his retirement in 2022 due to health concerns. This decision marked the end of an era for one of the largest and most influential churches in America. The leadership transition raised eyebrows, particularly when Warren chose Andy Wood, a former Saddleback pastor, as his successor. But the real controversy began when Warren made a bold decision that would change the course of the church's future. Warren's decision to ordain 3 women as pastors was met with intense opposition, particularly from the Southern Baptist Convention, SBC, which has a conservative stance on gender roles in church leadership. For Warren, this was a step toward inclusivity, reflecting his belief in empowering women to lead in the church. However, the SBC saw this as a direct challenge to their doctrinal stance, leading to a swift and harsh response. In February 2023, the SBC officially expelled Saddleback Church from its ranks. This move marked a painful and public break for Warren, whose church had been a part of the Southern Baptist Convention for many years. The controversy was not just about theology, but about the broader cultural shifts that Warren had championed throughout his ministry. As he faced personal grief and professional scrutiny, this split from the SBC was yet another reminder of the difficult path he was walking, filled with both personal loss and public controversy. A heart for service amidst struggles. Despite the heartbreak, the controversies, and the challenges, Rick Warren's legacy is undeniable. His ministry has touched millions of lives, and his teachings have shaped the way countless pastors and church leaders approach their work. His approach to church growth, his focus on helping individuals find their purpose, and his emphasis on global outreach have set a standard for how churches can engage with the world. But perhaps the most enduring part of Rick Warren's legacy is his authenticity, his ability to be vulnerable, to share his struggles, and to speak openly about the pain and challenges he has faced in his personal life. In a world where leaders are often expected to be perfect and invulnerable, Rick Warren's honesty about his own weaknesses and heartaches has been a source of strength for others. As we reflect on the heartbreaking news that has emerged about Rick Warren and his ministry, one thing becomes clear. Rick Warren's story is one of incredible faith, resilience, and above all, love. Love for his family, love for his congregation, and love for the people he served around the world. Even as he faces personal tragedy and controversy, it's important to remember that Rick Warren's journey is a testament to the power of faith in the midst of suffering, and the way that our greatest challenges can sometimes lead us to a deeper understanding of our purpose and our calling. What's next for Rick Warren? As for the future, what's next for Rick Warren and Saddleback Church remains uncertain. But one thing is for sure, Rick Warren has changed the landscape of evangelical Christianity, and his impact will continue to be felt for years to come. Whether or not Saddleback Church remains aligned with the Southern Baptist Convention, its work of reaching out to the hurting and the lost will continue. And for Rick Warren, though his role may have shifted, his commitment to the message of purpose-driven living remains as strong as ever. In the end, the story of Rick Warren is not just about triumph and success. It's about resilience, about continuing to serve others even in the face of personal pain, and about never losing sight of the bigger picture. We may never fully understand why suffering exists or why certain things happen, but in Rick Warren's life, we see a powerful example of how to face hardship with grace, faith, and love. What are your thoughts on Rick Warren's journey and the challenges he's faced? Do you think his controversial decision to ordain women pastors was the right one? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this unfolding story.